Happy New Year, everybody. My name is Zachary Hine, owner of Carbon Digital Solutions. Back out here in the office, ready to talk some more about how we can improve your home network. Today's topic I call the Wi Fi trap. What is it about Wi Fi that's so appealing? Well, we all know that it's pretty easy to set up, nice and quick. There's no wired installations, nothing like that. But what happens when we have problems? Well, we're going to take a look at it today. Okay, everybody, let's get right into it. So, you're at home. You've just gotten home from a long day. You want to turn on some Netflix, and it's not connecting. Or perhaps your daughter and maybe, some other person in the house is also watching stuff online. And suddenly everything's kind of slow. It's not loading, it's buffering. What's the problem here? Well, this is a characteristic of Wi Fi. So, how does Wi Fi work? Well, it's a radio transmission. And that said radio needs to be able to talk and listen to the other devices connected to it. Now, this happens a lot faster than a human conversation, but it's still a limitation of the system. Just like when you're on a walkie talkie, you can't really have two people talking to each other because it'll just step on each other, and the transmission will get garbled and won't make any sense. This happens in aviation a lot. In fact, in a busy airport, sometimes it's hard to get any conversation in while you're on approach or something like that, just because there's so many pilots trying to contact air traffic control. So the same thing's kind of happening here. You have a centralized unit, your Wi-Fi router, and you may notice that during times of peak activity, like when everybody's home, you tend to have problems with your Wi-Fi network. So interference comes from a lot of different things, right? So in a crowded neighborhood, for example, you have all those houses. Chances are they all have their own Wi-Fi systems and they're all transmitting and they're all talking in the same frequency band. In your own house, you could have too many access points. That happens too sometimes. Um, everybody like puts one in their own room or whatever. And this causes a problem because they're all working on the same frequency band. That's either the 2.4 gigahertz or the 5 gigahertz, depending on the model. Okay, so we do have what's called channel spacing and channels, just like on a walkie-talkie or a CB radio or something. You got channel one, channel two, etc. The same thing is happening with Wi-Fi, which does help kind of disperse things. But as you'll see here soon, it's not especially helpful, especially on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. So another thing that could be causing the problem is electronic noise. Things like microwaves can cause interference to Wi-Fi signal because they're also on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. They're releasing electromagnetic noise. Um, Fluorescent lighting is another one. All right, moving right along here. Wall material. Okay, this could be cement, it could be wood, it could be, a wide range of other types of materials that are used to make the house and the walls and everything. Those cause signals to degrade, become weaker, bounce off of it, and this can cause problems with your Wi-Fi. And as mentioned earlier, the frequency range. Anything that's going to be causing interference on 2.4 or 5 gigahertz will give your Wi-Fi trouble. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when you have too many Wi-Fi devices, right? Just like the transmitter, if there's too many transmitters, providing signal for all these devices, as well as too many devices themselves. I think there's some 50 odd objects in my house that use Wi-Fi, right? The Wi-Fi radio has to talk and listen to all those devices, and it's not simultaneous, right? They have to take turns. Now, this is kind of alleviated a little bit if you have like a tri-band or dual band Wi-Fi device. Those are pretty common actually, but it's not 100%, and you're still going to experience some problems some of the time. All right. Now, one of the symptoms of this is that you just randomly disconnect. Your Wi-Fi just drops, just gone. You go, hey, what happened here? Why is this happening? Well, there's probably a lot of traffic on the network and it's becoming unreliable, right? So, one of the other things too, because it has to talk and listen to every single device and give it some sort of attention, you get slower speeds on all the devices. Now, if one person decides that they're going to be making a big old download, well, it's going to affect everybody on the network now because there's no way to kind of segment that bandwidth or prioritize other things. So you'll just kind of have to wait it out. Additionally, there are unique security challenges when dealing with Wi-Fi. So one of those things is that these signals can be intercepted. Um, there are network cards out there that can be plugged into a laptop and run on what they call a promiscuous mode, which means that it doesn't just have to connect to a singular network and communicate with traffic on that. It can just listen for all the traffic around it, and this allows packet capture and all sorts of other stuff to occur. So it's very important to be aware of that, especially when designing a network for your small business or your home, where maybe you don't necessarily want the signal leaving the confines of the house. All right. Now, the other thing that is a risk when you're using too much transmission power and those signals can be picked up outside is what they call war driving and war chalking. This is where somebody is literally driving around the neighborhood looking for Wi-Fi signals, and they're determining what kind of security it's using, if it's using any at all, because there are still some people out there who leave their networks unsecure, which is not a good idea because these people are out there. They're writing down your address, they're marking it, and they will exploit it if they can. The other thing is Wi-Fi protected setup, WPS. This was very popular at one point in time. It's kind of fallen out of favor because there's very obvious reason behind it, security-wise. And that is that the pins that it creates are easily guessed. And the other thing is that just about anybody can walk up to your router, especially at a house where it's probably not guarded from any physical access. They just click the button and they join the network. They didn't need to know your password or anything. They just click the button, right? And so when doing security evaluations, it's kind of one of the first things I like to disable is WPS, and I explain the security risks behind it. Because once somebody's on your network, they can do a lot of damage. They can cause a lot of problems, and they can capture a lot of network traffic, and in turn, analyze those packets, for example, find passwords, personal information, credit card numbers. The list goes on. All right on to the next thing. So, as we were kind of talking about earlier, network speeds are they're not always set in stone. When you buy that Wi-Fi device, it'll say, "Oh, up to 900 megabits per second." But in reality, you're probably not going to get anywhere close to that. Even with the new wireless AC, which is supposed to have better range and performance, well, you'll see some gains, but the thing is that you're probably not going to see the maximum speeds, especially if you're not right next to the router. If you're in another room, if you're upstairs and the router's in the basement, there's a lot of variables there, and there's a lot of reduction in signal strength and all sorts of things. So the bandwidth does vary dramatically. All right. And like I was saying earlier, physical objects that are between you and the router, are going to affect it. The other thing is that, you know, the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, that's wireless B, G, and N, they have a tendency to travel farther. And I know that sounds counterintuitive here, but lower frequency radio bands tend to go farther and pierce things better than the higher bandwidth, or, well, excuse me, the higher frequency range. The trade off there is that obviously there's slower connections. This is why 5G, even though it's promised really great speeds, has yet to really realize that because they go through the same problem. 5G is a really high frequency, and the distance between cellular towers has to be much smaller to support that network. So the other thing is the congestion from other radio devices like your neighbors, as we mentioned earlier. And in fact, I'm going to pull up uh, the Wi-Fi spectrum analysis for my device here. Let me just drag this over. Okay, so this is the 5 gigahertz band. All right, local interface here, that's me. Okay, that's my wireless bridge out here in my office. It connects to the main router, which is down a flight of stairs about maybe 20 feet from it, right? And you can see that just turning that corner, there's a pretty big loss in signal, right? And then this other little purple tower, that is the main router. And it has two bandwidths, right? It's got a 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz radio, and uh, like a 40 or 20 channel spacing, 20 megahertz channel spacing, right? And when we talk about channels, you can see up here, these are all the available channels for the 5 gigahertz spectrum. And I have my interface, because I eventually plan on doing a little more tuning. I set the channel width to 80 megahertz so that I get better performance. Although the main router downstairs doesn't quite support it yet. So I got to wait a little bit on that one. It's a little bit of an ongoing project that I have to do. But anyway, you can see here all these other ones on the bottom end, on the top end. There's one right in the middle. I like this guy. He's got no interference. He's on, a channel that apparently nobody else's routers want to negotiate to. But we're all crumbled up here and over here, and all this is background noise. All these neighbors, I can see them all, right? And then we go over to the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, and it's even worse. And that's because that frequency, like I said, it travels further, and there's actually less channels available, right? So here they are, 1 through 11. You can see these are all my neighbors right here. It's a mess. It's completely congested. And this is a problem that all of us are experiencing. And if you're in an apartment complex, I really feel bad for you, because it's probably way worse than this, right? Um, so we've kind of used up all of these spectrums, and because of it, we suffer with our Wi-Fi. So, what are our options when we want to have a better network, have it be more reliable because, you know, we have a home office or small office and we got business to do, or, we're tired of the interruptions to our Netflix and our gaming and the lag and all the other problems? Well, this is where Ethernet comes in. And, it doesn't have to be expensive to do. So, if we look here, a higher performance wireless router. So this is probably going to be ultimately the lowest cost option, the least amount of effort. You may still experience problems, but having a good, dependable wireless router that maybe has more radios, more antennas, better transmission power, all those things are going to kind of help. and drown out some of that background noise. But the trade-off is that that signal, may travel a little bit too far, and then you do have some security concerns there. So there's a balance, right? Um, I'm just not a fan of wireless. Now here I'm in a rental, so I kind of have to go that route, and that's why I have the wireless bridge that runs a wire into my office. If you notice, the walls are made of metal, so Wi-Fi doesn't penetrate it very well. um, anyway, so the other thing, like I was just talking about, and what I did, the wireless bridge, right? So it has a wireless backbone, meaning that the main signal comes from one Wi-Fi device to another, and then it's carried through wires to where you want it. This means that the device can be closer to the signal source and perform a little bit better, and the wires will carry it. And these are Cat 6, so they handle the bandwidth no problem, no bottleneck from there. The bottleneck itself is the wireless backbone, right? But if you can, the best option for you, especially in a home or small office environment, is either going to be putting in Cat 6 cables or Mocha, and I'll explain both. Okay, so uh, Cat 6 is an Ethernet cable. You've probably seen a million of them at this point in your life. Um, Cat 6 and up is going to have the best bandwidth. All right, you could probably get away with Cat 5, Cat 5e for a lot of applications, but I don't recommend it. With the cost of cabling being as low as it is, it's better to put in the Cat 6 and future proof yourself, and then you don't have to mess with it later. Um, those are dedicated to network and they support power over Ethernet, which means that you can do things like power a wired camera outside without having to plug it in anywhere, right? So all those security cameras you have, they can just run off an Ethernet cable. It's perfectly fine. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay, the other one is Mocha, which is basically Ethernet over coax. Now, some people had their houses wired with a lot of coax for, cable television or whatever. Well, they are capable of carrying an internet signal. In fact, most of the time, where does your internet signal come from in a residential area? A coax cable, right? So we can carry the signal over coax and then convert it to an Ethernet or whatever on the other side. And this will also help you save a little bit of money and not have to tear up drywall and put in new outlets and things like that, right? And then for businesses and for some lucky people in certain areas where they have great bandwidth, you got fiber optics. You can make a fiber optic network in your house if you wanted to. It's a bit expensive and the data transfer rate is pretty high. There'd be a lot of reward for it, but I don't find it necessary for most people. But I just want to leave it there. That is an option. Moving right along. Okay, so again, I was kind of ranting back there on the previous slide, but here we are, wired networks, right? Cat 6 is going to be the best option for speed, latency, sustained performance, and cost effectiveness. In my humble opinion, it's going to provide the best of all worlds and the lowest amount of downtime. It can be made redundant. If you're going to pull one line through a wall, you might as well do two or three. Have more than you need. Even put, another piece of mule tape through there so that you can pull another one someday if you need to. And then on the other side, you can make redundant links. So if one went down for whatever reason, you'd still have more, right? You can also use link aggregation to double or triple the bandwidth, whatever, going to and from a device. That would require multiple network cards and such, but there are situations where that happens, right? Um, Compared to Wi-Fi, you're going to see much better speeds, and they're going to be stable too. It's not going to flutter around. And when there's a lot of people on the network, you're still going to see pretty darn good performance. At that point, the bottleneck is the router itself and your ISP gateway, right? The modem, whatever is going out the wall to the rest of the world, the rest of the internet. Okay. Now, the other cool thing is that if we hook it up and design it right, we put a switch in, we can segment parts. So for a business, this might be ideal, right? You have your sales force on one area of the building, and you don't want them on the same network as, say, payroll or some other sensitive data area where, you know, some sales guy opens up an email from some random Joe Schmo on the internet, and suddenly there's a virus on their computer and they've compromised the whole network. We can avoid stuff like that with segmentation, um, blocking certain IP groups from going one place to the other, right? And while, kind of Wi-Fi does the same thing, it's not as secure. And in this case, a smart layer 3 switch can be used to control all this, and an admin can easily adjust it when need be, add people to groups, configure VPNs, and you're not going to suffer performance hits for it. The other huge, huge benefit is to your operations day to day. Less interruptions. As I put here, printers, computers, voice over IP calls, uh, you've seen it on Wi-Fi. They just randomly drop, right? It's the most frustrating thing ever. Oh, hold on, I got to call you back. I can't hear you. And hello, where'd you go? Those problems disappear. And that's really what you want in your business. If you want to look professional, you want to look clean, to the customer you're calling, and you don't want to sound like some call center out in who knows where calling some guy in another state just because your connection's low quality. We don't want that. We want your business to succeed. We want you to succeed. And a wired network will support that growth, will support the bandwidth you need, and keep you running without issues. If you are interested in talking to us about any of what I've talked about, or you have more questions, feel free to email me at my personal email, zachary.hein@carbondigitalsolutions.com, or call me 970-235-0265. Be glad to hear from you. You can visit our website at carbondigitalsolutions.com, and I really wish you guys a happy new year. Have a good one.